want to look at this interesting development, of course, an exciting news, talking about Nigerian government moving to improve on their air platforms. And as we have it, the government have gone ahead to buy 24 fighter jets. Not just that, we are seeing move to buy aircrafts, talking about military helicopters. I must say it's a welcome development because this will, in no doubt, give Nigerian armed forces the capacity they need to decimate bandits, terrorists, Fulani Militias, as the case may be. But as we have it, this one is coming from People's Gazette. It says Nigeria buys 24 fighter jets, NAF helicopters. That is Nigeria Air Force helicopters. The Foreign Minister inspects aircraft in Italy. A welcome development indeed. Because we have been saying it, that Nigeria have comparative advantage over insurgents. As you can see, this is part of that comparative advantage because as a country, we can confidently approach a country or an arm manufacturing company to buy armaments, war armaments, and all of that. But the militias, the militias, the terrorists cannot do that. So that is why I often say that the Nigerian Armed Forces is in no doubt more formidable than any bandit. That what we need as a people is the political will to deal with all of these issues. But I think this is a very bold move. Of course, a political will, I must say, seeing that we are getting this news. And apart from that, we are seeing before now how federal government have moved to buy about 50 fighter jets. I want to say that when all of this start arriving, I want to believe that it's going to be a game changer. Because for me, federal government must possess monopoly of coercive power to deal with all these issues. Because it is a legitimate thing to neutralize bandits. It's a legitimate thing to arrest and prosecute them to act as deterrent to others. That's why it came to me with excitement when we saw the arrest of those two Mahmuda terrorist leaders who are currently under prosecution. As a former governor of Kaduna State put it, that bandits do not repent. That the only bandit that have repented is one that have died. That his own ideology is to disalive them, send them to their creator who have the ultimate power to judge them. I want to say that his position is potent and is the right thing to do. But I want to say that the current situation where we see bandits coming out clearly to negotiate with authorities in the north is unacceptable. Even though the Katsina State governor recently denied involvement in any negotiation, but I want to say that we are seeing videos that made round on the internet depicting bandits, fully armed, coming to negotiation table. Though it may not be clear who is summoning the negotiation, but if you as the governor of a state, who is the governor and the chief security officer of the state, bandits will come back from the bushes, from the forest, into your state, negotiate, and go back to their enclaves, abodes, fully armed. Then the governor should be able to answer some level of question. Because as far as I'm concerned, that is definitely compromising the security integrity of that state. So I want to say that the governors should, as quickly as possible, synergize with federal government to acquire monopoly of coercive power through the federal government initiative of Forest Guard to be able to start dealing with all these issues. Because as far as I'm concerned, bandits do not deserve mercy. There should be no peace for the wicked. These people are wicked because the manner at which they disalive citizens is alarming. Because I want to say that even the peace you enter into is not sustainable. It's not sustainable because you have a situation where after the peace deal, once they feel dissatisfied, they will come back to start abducting people, kidnapping people for ransom, for maiming people, raping and all of that. So the best bet is for the government to move in, acquire monopoly of coercive power, and treat them in a language they best understand. And that language is the language of force, the language of the might of federal government, that they must get in full dose. Because I want to say that the likes of Todibelo, the likes of Ada Aleru, Akwashi that operates in Faskari local government of Katsina State must have their days in court or be neutralized in the battlefield to act as deterrent to others. So at this point, let us take this argument, or rather this conversation, to the angle of the inability of northern leaders to do the needful. The inability of northern religious leaders to do the needful. Because we understand that from psychological point of view, the newly born child, psychology views the brain of a newly born child as a tabula rasa, a clean slate, on which the caretaker writes anything he or she wishes to write. So the question is, by the time you give birth to children, allow them to grow in the wild, without parental care, without societal care, without molding them towards the right path of life, without channeling them towards the norms of the society, definitely they will grow to accept deviant acts. And they will become vulnerable to be recruited and radicalized into all manner of crime, whether Boko Haram, ISWAP, Fulani Militias, and all of that. That is where the likes of Shegumi and all the sheikh in the north have a role to play. Because it's not just enough to be asking for negotiation with bandits. It's not just enough to be asking government not to use kinetic approach to fight banditry. It's not just enough to be telling government, or rather your followers, that they should not vote for anyone that acquire more arms to fight bandits. If you as a leader, you are not able to educate the children from the north to know the right path of life, it means you have failed in your duty as a sheikh. I do not know much about Islam, but it has been proven by those who know much about it that it is a religion of peace, just as Christianity. Now, if that is the position, the question is, why do people still leverage on the same religion to claim that they are Muslims, and they still commit most of the crime we see? Because it's very clear that we understand that Boko Haram means Western education is sin. So where do we get to the point where those who should educate the people, the children, do not do so? They now grow up to believe that Western education is sin, and as we speak, is a sect that is wreaking havoc in Nigeria. So it means those northern stakeholders have failed in their responsibility, particularly the sheikhs have failed in their responsibility to educate the children from the cradle. We know that the Jonathan government started Almajiri School in his time as the president, but as soon as they ousted him from office, Muhammad Buhari took over. The government of Muhammad Buhari jettisoned the idea. One would have expected that that government would have continued in that trajectory, knowing that this trajectory meant well for the downtrodden, for the ordinary man in the northern part of the country. But the question is, why will someone as a president from the north jettison such idea? So I think it points to one direction, that the average northern leader do not want the downtrodden to get education, so that they can easily micromanage them, so that they can easily control them. Because otherwise, I don't see any reason northern leaders will not allow the downtrodden to get education. Even under the same Jonathan, we saw a situation where some governors accused him of genocide against the North. And that was because Jonathan government was giving the security situation the necessary attention that it deserved, the necessary willpower that it deserved, under the then leadership of General Jirika as the Chief of Army Staff. So now, the monster they build, the monster they pampered, is now a problem for everybody. Because the issue of banditry, Fulani Militias, is no longer restricted to the northern part of the country. It's already been exported to the southern part of the country. I understand that Kwara is in the north, but I want to say that the activity of banditry was not high in Kwara State before now. But look at the situation of Kwara State currently. A situation where people now flee from their ancestral homes. Fulani bandits now sack people from their ancestral homes. So you begin to wonder, begin to ask, how did we get here? And if you look at the angle of out-of-school children in the north, it's another area people do not give serious attention. Because you begin to wonder, it beats all imagination why in a state, you see as much as 60-something% out-of-school children. In some states, you see 50-something%, 40-something%, 30-something%, 20-something%, 10% as the case may be. And all the out-of-school children, the percentage of out-of-school children in Nigeria is higher. You find higher percentages in the northern part of the country. So the question is why? Why are we not seeing the same level of out-of-school children in the southern part of the country? Because I take exception with position of some northern stakeholders who recently blame federal government for out-of-school children in the north. Because I understand that actually, if you go through the rudiments of universal basic education, it puts the responsibility of training Nigerian child, educating Nigerian child under the federal, the state, and local government, the 3 tiers of government. However, what behoves the federal government to do is the policy direction and the funding. And this they do for the 36 states without exception. So the question is, why are we not seeing that level of out-of-school children in the south as we see in the north? Because when it comes to building the classrooms, engaging teachers, enforcing that the students are in school, it is under the purview of the states and the local governments. And I understand that in the south, this is what the state governments and local governments are doing. So the question is, why are we not seeing northern governments, state governments and local governments doing the same thing? So it goes to show that there's a deliberate attempt to leave the children uneducated for some sinister motive. And I want to believe that this is the reason we often see the elites, the ruling class in the north, always at loggerhead or rather disagreeing with the emir of Kano, talking about Muhammad Sanusi. You understand that his position has always been give the children education. And I also want to say that the child you refuse to educate is not just a problem for his or herself. That child is a problem for his or herself, a problem for his immediate family, a problem for his immediate community, for his local government, for his state, and for Nigeria in general. Because the children you refuse to give education who now become vulnerable to be radicalized, recruit into a manner of crime, banditry, terrorism, they are no longer operating within their communities or even states. They are even exporting them to the southern part of the country. So that is why pressure should be on northern stakeholders to take the children out of the streets, to ensure that they educate their children from the cradle. However, those who are already radicalized, who are already criminal, who are already bandits, should face prosecution when arrested or should be neutralized in the battlefield. That is my own position. Because as far as I'm concerned, Nigerians need to be protected. And the approach of doing this should be multifarious. When you talk about non-kinetic approach, it's not just about, of course to me, it's not about going to negotiate the bandits. It should start from the cradle, ensuring that people who are being given battle are getting the best of education, are getting the values of the religion they choose to follow, not the adulterated one that teaches them violence, as we see currently. So for me, that is when you talk of non-kinetic approach, that is the angle we should be looking at. Not necessarily the non-kinetic approach always canvassed by the likes of Shegumi. But I must say very thank you for time. This is Sadla Bidam, Mr. Mati.